sort of identifying which ones we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And let's share screen. I'm gonna do mute to the YouTube. Civil court forms. Yeah, breach of rental agreement for storage space. I'm like, what?
Yes.
Why? How did that
Oddly
get
specific, right?
Yeah, right? How did that get playtime on the state's website? That's
Well, I think it's a common problem. You know, as people are evicted, they don't want to lose all their stuff and they can afford rent of a storage space, but not an apartment. And so I think those storage space rentals are much more common than they used to be. And
yeah,
then people get evicted from those spaces, and there's that
as
whole
well. Yeah,
section of the law about how long they have to retain the stuff and what they can do with it. So
we're we're automating all of these, but I think we were gonna do like a landlord tenant one specifically
yeah,
as well.
but they do, I don't know, because I don't practice, so I'm not in court, but some of these forms, you think, do they come up that often? Notice by party of ITV use requested by motion. Is that a common thing? I mean, it must be, I suppose, if it's on there.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. We're consulting with other folks on which one. This one we'll automate all of them. This one we didn't prioritize though.
No, and
And
that's
some of
such
these are
old
instructions,
old
but
terminology, right? Who's heard the term ITV in the last,
yeah,
since the pandemic? We all talk about Zoom and virtual, but we don't use that phrase
yeah.
interactive television.
Hang on, I'm gonna grab my coffee. And let's see.
Ah, yes, you were playing around in there.
Oh yeah, I was trying to. It's pretty simple. Yeah, I was looking for some more substantive stuff, and I actually don't know. Well, we'll cover that after the top of the hour. But
That's
I
right.
actually don't know a lot about this particular item, so eager to learn. What else should I get up here? We had the Westlaw. I was going to look for the case. It's too old. I think it was yesterday. When did that come down?
I thought it was yesterday, but I'm old, so it was probably longer ago than I think. Let's try the day before yesterday if it wasn't. Court. Yeah, 2 days ago. Joe Klein.
Do you know much about the 2040 plan?
You know, I don't know much about it. I should. It affects me. I live in Minneapolis.
I know. That's this is one of the things I was thinking about this week. Is God, there's some obvious things that I am not aware of. I work and live in Minneapolis. That'd be a thing that you'd think I'd be, a little closer, more closely attuned with.
Yeah, me too. I know it's very much an emotional topic for people who care about it.
Yes.
I mean, people just make these grand pronouncements one way or the other about it. It'll, destroy the city. It's the key to urban renewal. I'm like, oh boy.
Which one is it? Right. Pick a lane.
Exactly.
Can't
It's very
possibly
charged.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 5 years. Well, got to give those lawyers something to do, right, Mike?
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Uh, much advertising. All right. Maybe we can set up we're at the top of the hour here. And we're live on YouTube, so we can get rolling.
Excellent.
Glad to have you back, Karen.
Good to
This
be
is the
back.
Gray Paper Podcast. We're here live, answering the question, what is the most interesting legal research questions of the week? We've got a bunch this week, Karen. I'm Mike Carlson. I'm with Gray Paper Legal.
I'm Karen Westwood, Director of the Hennepin County Law Library.
Karen, what was your most interesting legal research question of the week?
Well,
You had several,
this question I think would be for the true geeks among us. It had to do with a special law and whether it had been changed. So you've pulled up.
Am I at the right spot here for table one?
I'm not. Oh yeah. So yeah, this is the session laws amended or repealed page that indicates, and I don't know why it has this date range on it. It allows you to search for citations to uncoded laws enacted from 1945 through 2017, although it appears actually to be current. So if you go back to civics or law school, you'll recall that the legislature passes laws of general application that are then codified and appear in the Minnesota statutes. But they also pass all these other laws, right? They list them there: special laws, local laws. I don't know. I can't read because
Curative and validating laws.
right.
As I was reading that this morning, I'm like, I mean, intuitively, I think I can guess what those mean, but
Yeah.
What's an example of a curative law? What's the example of a validating law?
Yeah, I'm not
Curative, I assume, is corrective, to say, well,
right.
what we meant here was, or there was a
exactly.
misspelling, or validating law. I guess I don't know.
I'm not entirely sure, except that if you pull out the paper version of the tables, table 1 description says this is the table of local special acts, and it includes laws relating to particular local government units or local courts enacted from 1849 to 2022 and not coded in Minnesota statutes. Many laws have been superseded by later general or special laws. Note, here's where we really get in the weeds.
Yeah.
This table does not show whether a local unit of government ever approved a local law for which local approval was required. So sometimes the state legislature passes these local laws, and sometimes local approval is required, not always.
The municipality has a similar situation, and not everything that is passed ends up in the Muni Code, the codified version of the Muni Code.
Exactly. So approval of a local law is filed by the local unit of government with the Office of the Secretary of State, which keeps the official records. To determine if a local unit of government approved a local law, consult more tables 4, 5, and 6 of Laws of Minnesota for the year the law was enacted and subsequent years. If the law is not approved before the beginning of the next legislative session in an odd-numbered year, the law is deemed to be disapproved unless otherwise provided by a special law. So my goodness. But I think for a researcher, it's not so important to know and retain all of that information.
Yeah.
You just have to remember table one is your friend. And once you get into table one and you start poking around, these other questions will arise for you. Wait a minute, did it ever go into effect? Was it ever approved? Is it still on the books? And so forth. And for that, you just have to spend time in the laws of Minnesota. When I first became a law librarian and I learned the whole progression of, right, the legislature passes the bills and it, the whole governor signing and all of that. And then back in that day, they were published as slip laws. You'd get these physical pieces of paper of individual laws, and then they'd be codified into the statutes. And I used to wonder, well, then why keep the laws of Minnesota in your law library once they're all codified? And the answer, of course, is they're not all codified. And so you can go back, and the laws contain a lot of those appropriations bills that are passed and are of general application, but they're not codified because they change.
So frequently, like an appropriation. There's no reason to codify that. Otherwise,
exactly.
The statutory text would be gigantic. Or if it's of limited application, if it applies to one of these municipalities, which has got to be approved, it's not something that. So we search, and I guess I've always called them the session laws because of my background with at Thomson Reuters, which is, I guess, what we called them there. But you librarians maybe more often refer to them as the laws of the state, laws of Minnesota.
Well, and they're different for different states. Blue Book will indicate that. So they're published in Minnesota as laws of Minnesota, but we would refer to them as session laws as well. Yeah.
It usually, I'd stumble across this information as a note in the session law itself, or I would, just be searching the historical legislative information and find it there. Now in Westlaw, it'll be added in the notes at the bottom if there's a note that's related to the. We should maybe pull up an example. But the note will be included at the statute itself, so it's available there quite often. Not the appropriations, not things like that, but oftentimes if it's a note. But that's always the way that I've stumbled across it. It's like, I've never affirmatively sought them out or looked for them, and I have to say I'm not sure I've used this table.
It doesn't come up often because I think who it comes up for, right, are people who work in local government, and they track it getting passed by the legislature, and they're tracking what their local government is doing with it. And in the old days, I'm sure they had paper files. Now they have, I'm guessing, internal databases that they use to verify things and work on approvals and cross T's and dot I's. But once in a while, you get someone, an attorney who's working on an issue for a client, and they need to do this work we've talked about before of local ordinances and local rules and things like that. And they stumble on a reference to one of these special laws, and then they're trying to figure out, is that special law still in effect? Was it actually approved? And Table 1 will tell you if these local laws then were subsequently amended and what was the date of the last amendment. So the question I had received on this particular most recently was about a local municipality's special law that went into effect in 71, was amended in 73 and 75 or some couple of subsequent years. And then he's like, and so what happened? Was it ever amended again? And Table 1
had the information.
That he had the most current information. And then because of that opening paragraph that said it was only through 2017, I pulled up the print volume dated 2022. Is that when it was dated? Yeah. And verified that nothing else.
I was wondering about that because it looks like we've got 2023 the 93rd legislature. I'm wondering if that's a typo.
I think it's just an oversight. Once you write one of those
Yeah.
explanatory paragraphs, you don't always go back
Yeah.
to double check.
So this person came to you in a similar fashion that I usually found that they stumbled across this reference, and because you're not searching by key term or anything like that, you're searching by the
Right.
session, chapter, article, section. They had a
Right.
reference that you could use on
Yep.
this table to.
Yep. They had a reference, and once I pulled up the initial special law, I found out what it was about. And then in the print version of the table, I went in by topic. I went by the
Oh,
locality, and then the whatever it was, education district or whatever was being modified. I can't remember anymore.
interesting. So
yeah.
there's a topical index in print,
Right.
not
Right.
anywhere on the website that I.
Right. And I thought that was a good double check, right?
Yeah.
So I
Very
could
nice.
try to look it up one way
That is a
and
good
then
one.
another way and make sure that my information matched. But that got me thinking a little bit more about special laws, Mike, because my colleague Rich was asked to do a presentation for the Minnesota Genealogical Society earlier this year about
Yeah.
how to use court records for genealogy research. So, of course, Rich, being a research librarian, starts out with what he knows, right? You can go into, as we know in Minnesota, trial court records and do some research. It's not great for genealogy because those records have been automated so recently. So he did a little more digging around and found a webinar through Hein Online, one of our vendors, Hein.
Yeah.
That was a genealogist talking about how in some states, early on, these private and special laws were used for all kinds of things. The legislature would grant divorces and they would have these private laws, and they were kind of these private actions. So you could find information on divorce, on property transfer, of course, which is always interesting if you're just trying to get names. And then in states where people were enslaved, there would sometimes be some kinds of records, I don't know, sending, formerly enslaved people back, to slave owners, and, kind of this sort of property approach to people, but a way to find names that you might not otherwise be able to locate.
That's interesting. I occasionally get a genealogy question, and I will often say that's not what I do.
Right.
Yeah, those are tough. I'm not familiar with those resources, and but that's interesting. So the legislature and divorce in the same. That seems such like a but you do stumble across that in the legislative history sometimes.
Right. In Minnesota, I'm not sure that
local.
Minnesota ever did it or just did it a little bit, but I think in other states it was a little more common. And for those, of course, you do have to go back in time. And some of us in law librarianship subscribe to Hein Online, which is the service that has digitized. Have they digitized? They've created PDF electronic copies of session laws from all of the states and territories. So you can do a lot from the law library if that's your jam.
I think isn't Hein. So we've got that through the local law library. I think I think there's access through, I want to say, the Hennepin County Library as well.
I don't think they have Hein.
Just through
the law library, yeah. And ours is limited to on-site use for most folks. Because we're a membership library. If you're a member, you can access Hein from your office. But
yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's not, you get used to these other search interfaces that are just so sophisticated. And, I know you often jump on Westlaw or, even Google, excellent searching. Get to something like Hein Online, and you do revert back to thinking a little more traditionally about using tables of contents and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Because
I was
the,
gonna say, you know,
optical character recognition, yeah, isn't great on some of those old sources that were scanned.
yeah, browsing is a legitimate research technique in my
That's
view,
right.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's uh, so often not the book you're looking for in the library, it's the one next to the book that you're looking for in the
right.
library, right? That's so,
That's right.
so it's a legitimate the strength of weak ties, as they say in the math world, I guess. It's
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And sometimes like devising a better search takes as much energy and time as scanning through,
yeah,
50 case titles and head notes or whatever. You can just move through scanning
yeah, and that
with
happens
your
to
own
me
eyes. Yeah.
regularly as you sort of dig in on a research project. I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
there's an index, or if
Yeah.
it's not so much common anymore because Google's pretty good, but there are many times working with folks. I'm like, well, did you Google that? Does that, there's often just a slightly different strategy or alternative method that is, you dig in on one strategy and you think, oh, I could do it better.
Right.
Am I doing it right? And then,
Right.
well, maybe you could improve on your Boolean query or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, but maybe you need to find another resource. It's
Yeah.
super common.
Yeah. I know when statutes first were showing up on Westlaw and Lexis, they didn't include tables of contents as part of that
Oh yeah,
interface. They'd just be like, well, you can just search for the statute you want. And I was like, there is intellectual input into how statutes are arranged, right? Like, you
yeah.
get that?
Well, and they now celebrate their own topical index, which I like. And not every state has it. Minnesota does a pretty good job with their. They have a
Oh, yeah.
great
Yes.
topical index, which works really, really well. But not all states have that. Westlaw's got
Right.
their own version for each state, which I rely on quite
Yeah.
regularly.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
It's very in depth. Though, what do they call their statute of limitations? For some reason, I don't know if this is because this is the way it's phrased in the key numbers, but if you were to do this on the state's website, you'd go to statute of limitations.
Yeah.
Mysteriously, Westlaw calls it limitation of actions. I don't know
I
how
think it used to be called that by the state.
by the
revised
state,
statutes. I think
really.
I think it was the language of the statute. I remember early on in law librarianship, looking up statute of limitations, not finding it and thinking, oh yeah, it's called something else. Same like you used to not be able to find divorce in the index. It was under dissolution of marriage.
Dissolution, yeah.
I'd be like, oh, come on. Help me out
Who was
here.
I talking? I
It
was
got
talking
better
to
with
some.
cross-referencing in the index, but early on.
That was the gray hat bloggers over at FindLaw used to have this conversation with their customers all the time because they were drafting for SEO right back in the day when dynamic content was what they thought drove visits to your website. And say, we're not going to call it dissolution of marriage, we're going to call it divorce because that's what your prospective clients are going to be searching for.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite have the flair of formality that dissolution of marriage has.
Yeah. Well, it's
but
also that problem. I think I've talked about it before, Mike, where like when you try to automate forms or make forms more readable to the non-attorney, if you use divorce, but all the statutes use the term dissolution of marriage, then it can introduce some confusion, to a non-attorney. Are we actually talking about the same thing? What is this other thing called dissolution? So you try to make it more plain language. And I mean, it's just a continuing struggle to make it clear, but also use the terminology so that someone can understand. if they're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean that's just also the problem of dealing with 50 plus jurisdictions, right? Land
Exactly.
contract is a contract for deed, is a, I think
Yeah.
there's several other terms for that.
Yep.
The skill of a researcher used to be knowing what all of those alternative terms might
Yeah.
be. We have less concern with that now with improved indexes and AI
Right.
and things, but
Yeah.
still kind of important to know if you're not finding it in the index, it's probably called something else.
Right.
But it's standardized. So, and on Westlaw, at least it's their index from state to state to state. So, limitation of actions is what you're going to find no matter which
Yeah.
jurisdiction you're in. So that's one thing I appreciate and is worth my
Yep.
money for, I think. And
Yeah, for sure.
let me get back to these hyper local issues were one of my most interesting legal research questions of the week. I jumped a little bit into zoning today. I've not done a lot of zoning research. I know there's some good treatises out there. Was it Rathkoff's, I think. So there's good secondary source material, but that it's such a hyper local issue. And
I mean, it's just self-preservation, Mike.
yeah.
Run away from zoning questions whenever possible.
Oh, do you really? You don't like them?
Well, they're so
You must get
frustrating.
a lot more than I do. I'm guessing that's
It's,
like a regular thing for you.
it isn't so regular now that most local jurisdictions put their codes up on the internet in some fashion, but people have trouble searching Municode, and I don't know, you get to this area where you're like, did it pass? Did it not? I'm reading about things in the paper. I can't figure out what's going on. And in the old days, you used to just pretty much call the county or the municipality and get some kind of clerk and say, what's the deal?
Yeah.
Because it can be hard to find.
Yeah, especially if you're not in a major. I mean, at least I'm in Minneapolis,
Right.
and there are people I can call for help, and it's even though this issue was clouded by I have to say clouded by politics recently, right? Because I kind of had my head in the sand. I think I am in. I just didn't know. I wasn't tracking this issue. It just was not super busy. I don't have a lot of clients and doing this zoning kind of stuff, so I wasn't like tracking what was going on with the 2040 plan and the recent though thinking back, I'm like, oh right, I remember people complaining about the environmental issues and the ownership of black ownership of housing and things like that, and I just didn't put two and two together. But my research issue was, all right, what's the zoning of this particular simple, right? What it went into the state's website, looked up, went to the map, and was like, oh, this is a CM2. I'm like, wait, I'm not familiar with that terminology. It's a commercial mixed zone 2. Okay, then I can go on the website. Well, but I'm an attorney, so let's just confirm, what that looks like in the municipal code. So I jump into the municipal code, and there's no reference at all to these codes. So what am I missing? Well, I'm missing the major issue of the day, right? The 2040 plan was struck down by a judge. Well, and first of all, the 2040 plan made active at July 1st, I think. So, it takes a little time. Though I think Municode is up to date pretty quickly.
My impression is Municode updates pretty quickly. Yeah, I think that's right.
Like, I mean, we're already into mid-September here. So I would have thought that that would have been incorporated into the text already. So I understand it probably takes some time, but that's several months. I would imagine that would have been updated, but we're all in limbo now because the judge struck down, I think, on the environmental issues. I haven't actually read the information yet, but it's like, yeah, right. 2040 plan, of course. So, going round and round, sensitive issue these days because I'm like, oh yeah, I should, how to be thinking about something like zoning, it's a local issue. Liquor
Right.
licensing, another recent issue. That's I have to jump in and be on feet on the ground and be looking around the neighborhoods and talking to people, and you wouldn't think that that's like local that's legal research, but it is, because if you don't know what the paper has happened to the local newspaper during COVID, or when they stopped printing their publication on newsprint and moved to the website, I mean, all of that, those little weird little details
Yeah, those public
matter.
notice
And
things and, oh, yeah, yep, yeah.
so it's still OR2, not CM2, because there's we don't know we just don't know. Right?
Yeah.
We don't know
And
what
it's
it
so
looks like.
frustrating, right? Can you imagine being a builder trying to figure out what to do? You
Yes.
had a plan and you're basing it on the 2040 plan, and now you're going back to the 2030 plan, and you're trying to figure out what fits and what'll work. And I don't envy folks in that position.
Great. I mean, Minneapolis, at least I thought, really good job on the website. Very easy to use that map and identify see your property,
Yeah.
and so pretty good resources, I thought. But
Yeah,
but yeah, it
Mike,
was
we
great.
should talk about this GIS mapping
Yes.
in a future podcast. There's so much really rich information that you can learn from these maps overlaid over each other. And for some, I think in Hennepin County, I think on the public site, you can change some of the mapping. So you overlay, I don't know, like transit access to public library locations. Classic thing in libraries, you'd look at, how can people reach your services? But there are all these other kinds of maps you can overlay and really learn interesting things about the city and the county.
Yeah, there are good resources out there. Those are fun to work in too. Those, if Tableau or Google's got a product. I think they purchased something called Looker,
Oh,
which I think used to be called Data Studio. But it's easy now, just for anybody, without a big data background, to geocode your data and quickly build a visualization
right,
based on your data, if you can get the data.
right.
So it's easy to build these maps now, which is pretty cool. And share them. That's a good one. That's a good one. We should do a little CLE on
Yeah,
GIS and mapping, and some of the basic principles of and it'll be a good opportunity for me to get up to speed too on some of those
yeah.
tools.
I mean, it would be great to find someone who's really well versed in that, because people get graduate degrees in these.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it's called in GIS
What's it called?
stuff. But I mean, and there must
Cartography, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of like ethical principles around that too, because you can distort results easily with graphs and maps and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
But it can also convey such a lot of information in such a concise space.
I don't know. I think we looked at WTF visualizations on this.
We did.
Yeah. An update.
Yeah. Right. And how distorted they can.
Good examples of really bad visualizations. Yeah. And on this website, to your point, they were talking about, I think there's some on here where they highlight how dictators and other despots abuse these visualizations to make it look like they're more popular than they are.
Right.
Right. Make people seasick by scrolling through some, but I think there are a few in here.
Today's episode of Making You Seasick.
But yeah, WTF visualizations.
I'd forgotten about that, Mike. I have to go back and look at those again. They're good fun.
Look like it's updated very regularly, but here's one where kind of a weird.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
And I think a lot of these are just mistakes. 56%
Yeah.
no,
Oops,
44%.
44% yes. Oh, that's great.
The problem with these visualizations for me is like I should be able to get it, right? And like no, it's actually if you're struggling with it, it's probably not an effective visualization.
Right, right.
And even if
It
it is
proves
an
the
effective
point. Yeah.
visualization, you still have to look at it critically to
Yeah.
make sure you're not being unfairly influenced by the graph. But yeah, so those were my most interesting. I had lots of research this week, which was a lot of fun, a lot of more AI stuff happening this week as well. It got me to thinking about. I mean, I think we all now understand basically what the AI tools do. They assemble language,
Right.
and I think the tone even of the outputs are recognizable now,
Yeah.
and because they in some, or they kind of conclude with a summary paragraph where there's an introduction that looks like it was written by for a junior high essay writing contest or something.
Right.
It's
Yep.
not to say that it's not amazing. I mean, it's just it feels a little generic. And
Yep.
I was in a conversation on one of the social networks where I felt like this has got to be at least helped with some
Yes.
with
So
some AI because
yeah.
of the tonal
Yep.
things like that. I think it might
Right.
I think it might have just been the formal nature of the conversation
Yeah.
probably. But one of the things that thought made me think that it's not is that it was asking questions, right? So can an AI ask, if it's going to make an argument, is it going to make the argument with a rhetorical question?
Yeah.
And I suppose that's possible. If it's just assembling words, it can probably recognize that kind of
Right.
method.
Yeah.
But the question and the I just couldn't tell because the questions were not necessarily logical. It made sense to put those words together, you
Right.
know,
Right.
uh, but it didn't make sense for the argument that was being made in the. I'm like, is that something the AI can even do? The short, I don't know. I mean,
Right. Right.
um, to me, that kind of rhetorical framing is still something that we rely on humans to do, but
Yeah.
I could be wrong about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I was talking with a friend who's not a researcher or a librarian, very intelligent person, but she pulled something up, via a Google search, and I was looking at it, and she said, I mean, it's not a great source. It looks to me like an intern or something wrote it, and no one proofread it. And I said, I don't think a human wrote this. And she was
Yeah.
like, what? She read about AI and I was like, it doesn't sound right. I don't even think it was good AI that came up with this. This was just auto generated. And
Yeah.
I doesn't look like any kind of source I know about. So I'd be pretty skeptical about it. And I thought, gosh, Mike, you and I swim in this all the time. But if you don't try to evaluate things like that for work, it is challenging because it did sound like a sloppy person wrote this little entry.
Yeah.
And it could have been. I think it was some kind of something was crawling the web and compiling information and presenting it in a poor
Yeah.
way. But
I mean, I definitely want those tools to extract and summarize and
right,
review. I don't want to have to go through 1,000 pages. I want
exactly.
it's just the, and this is all new and still trying to figure out its application. One of the tests I had did this week. I think the question was something like, how does the if I've got an application that collects geolocation data, how is that application affected or impacted by Illinois' BIPA statute, which is Biometric Information Privacy Act?
Oh, yep,
And the answer, of course, is on the one hand, it doesn't, because it's biometric information, which is different than geolocation data.
oh,
But then
sure,
you got, and then why? But why is this question being asked?
right,
What made you think that it's about asking that, and that's why I was wondering about rhetorical questions, or
right,
saying why,
exactly.
like,
Yeah,
why are you thinking that this might apply to you in the first place?
right,
And that's a creative leap. That's a um
yeah,
that I'm not sure the AI is able to make yet.
right,
eh, so there's some work to be done by the
yep,
lawyer there still to
yeah,
press a little bit. But why are you in my office right now? And
yeah,
uh,
yeah, exactly. And what are you picturing, right?
yeah,
Like, help me understand your point of view. Yeah,
and you
yeah,
wouldn't send that person away to say it doesn't apply to you, right?
right,
Because
right,
because how are you using your um are you using a fingerprint to log your geolocation at that particular time? Why, what's
right.
up?
Or are you just misspeaking? Because humans do that.
Yeah,
Did you
right.
not mean the Biometric Information Protection Act?
Yeah,
Maybe you're thinking of the something something Protection Act, and
right.
and with the right term, all of a sudden it makes all kinds of sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
that's
it
a
could
really
go
good
any
point.
direction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Imagine, and imagining why somebody might make that. Though I think, I mean, obviously that's misspellings or truncations that you use on any. It's like, did you mean that? That's quite often. You do
right.
get those kind of
You do
corrections,
get
I
that.
guess.
That's
But
right. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Great. Well, what are you looking forward to this week, Mike?
Oh boy, this week, what have I got going on this week? I'm not prepared for that question this week.
You're too busy to know.
It has been crazy, so I am looking forward to maybe hopefully a little break.
Yeah,
But
well, good.
we are building that. We were talking right before we started. We're about to wrap this construction of this new product that we've got for Minnesota civil litigators, where we've automated all the Minnesota civil litigation forms. So pretty excited to get that up and ready for
Yeah,
testing this week. So that's
yeah.
excited to get that done. What about you? What are your next?
Mm. I always say, I don't know. We'll see what the week brings. We have our September CLE coming up next Friday, which is going to be John Carney from Carney Forensics. He
Oh yeah,
presents for us usually about once a year. I think this year is just kind of an update on how tech is influencing civil. I think both civil and criminal litigation. He did the last one he did for us was how mobile devices are the new DNA, and that
yeah, yeah,
using that to provide these kinds of things. Where are you located? What was happening at a time
yeah.
based on your mobile device? But
I've seen his presentations before. They're good. I recommend it.
yep.
I hope folks who are watching will attend. I think that it's a good. That's a good CLE. I saw him most recently, I guess. Oh, geez, it was a cold month, so it's been almost
Uh-huh.
half
Yep.
a year, I think. But he gives a
Yeah.
good
Yep.
presentation.
Yep. He does. He does a good presentation, and it's just always good to remind ourselves of what we should be thinking about.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. It's a good technical thing, and those services, we could do a whole nother program on those services. That's an area where it's not the kind of research I do necessarily, but those folks are and it's I think it's both a highly competitive landscape for folks like John Carney, but
Yeah.
also there's not a ton of them. So typically I think lawyers are looking to 3 or 4 people.
I think so locally, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that would be a really challenging space to operate in because things change so quickly.
Yeah.
You always have to be trying to stay a step ahead. So,
Yeah. Well,
but
very
good
cool.
fun, right?
I
Keeps you
look
young.
forward to that. And Karen,
Great.
thanks so much for
Thank
joining us
you.
again. You're awesome as always. And
Always a pleasure. Something to look forward to on a Friday morning.
we'll see everyone next week. Take care.
Next week. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.